Hey everyone, Mrhappy here, and welcome to my guide to the Abyssal Fracture Extreme, aka Zeromus Extreme. It's a pretty easy fight with one main gimmick that's sure to cause some problems, but otherwise, I think you'll be fine. Use the timestamps in the description to skip to whatever mechanic you want to check out, and with that, let's get started. Before pulling, you'll need some assignments. Spreads are okay to set, it's kind of just habit, but they're not crucial to any specific thing. Make sure that you at least assign 2 light party groups made up of the usual 1 tank, 1 healer, and 2 DPS, and also set up role pairs. That means 1 support and 1 DPS in a pair each. You'll also want to assign corners to each of these role pairs and potentially a lineup. Ranged and healer pairs should be assigned to the southwest and southeast corners, and the melee and tank pairs should take the northwest and northeast. Zeromus will begin the encounter with a few autos before casting Abyssal Nox. This attack will reduce everyone to 1 HP and give them a 10-second Doom debuff. Simply heal everyone to full before the 10 seconds are up to dispel the Doom. Macrocosmos will not work on this as a warning, Astros, so be sure to use your other healing cooldowns. Right after Abyssal Nox will be 2 sets of circle AoEs back to back, with their explosions originating from the glowy spots on the ground. Fortunately, it's always either north or west safe first, followed by the opposite one. So if north isn't safe, then go west or vice versa, and then do the reverse for the second set. After that will be Sable Thread, a split damage line AoE. It appears to do more damage to the 2 targets closest to Zeromus, so have both tanks pop a cooldown and stand in front of the rest of the party. The main tank is also still taking autos during this, so pay extra attention to them. Then it's Dark Matter, which is just a 3-hit tank buster on both tanks. Mit and heal through, nothing special. The first potentially tricky mechanic is Visceral Whirl. Same as normal mode, it does 2 sets of AoEs with tendrils swiping across the room, leaving 2 safe areas, one close to Zeromus and one further away. Keep this in mind for later because you will want to know both safe spots, especially if you're a support. After Visceral Whirl, Zeromus will leave behind 3 X's on the ground that after some delay do massive line AoEs in the direction of the points on the X. Similar to Visceral Whirl, there are 2 safe spots from this. There are a finite number of patterns, of course, and thus there's only 3 potential safe spots for each type of Visceral Whirl. Option number 1 is to memorize all the patterns and just be able to do them as you see them. Option number 2 is the Danger Dorito, one person you trust, and follow them. Probably not the best idea. Option number 3 is to just learn a few rules so that you can see how they're arranged and not really need to geometry out where the safe spot is. So a few tricks I use to identify the safe spot. For one, there will always be a safe spot close to the boss and always wear the front set of tendrils swiped first. So if your first safe spot from the tendrils is northwest, then the next safe spot would be northeast. There are then 3 potential safe spots in whatever corner is going to be safe second, either close to the boss, along the east or west wall, depending on the side, or directly in the corner. Now here are a list of all the X patterns. Now I'm hoping this is all of them, but regardless, there's some patterns that you can pick out. For example, if there is an X through the middle of the room, there's usually only 1 more X north of it, and then the safe spot would be north of that. If there's 2 X's on the north side of the room, both northwest and northeast, then you know the opposite east or west side wall is safe. And if there's a corner that only has a single X in it, usually sitting on a cardinal, like in this case with the west one, then that means that that corner is going to be safe. Honestly, it's just kind of patterns I'm looking at now and seeing now after doing it so much. But memorizing the patterns, trusting your party, and just getting some practice in is really all you need to do to get this mechanic down. It's not worth pulling up a list of diagrams on the right every single time this mechanic happens. Finally, there is also a safe spot near the back of the room following much the same principles as the north side. For the north or wall safe spots, the other one will be 90 degrees rotated towards the back. And for corner safe, the opposite corner will be safe. You can technically do every mechanic from the front safe spot across the entire fight, but if you're comfortable dodging to the back side of the room, it helps a lot later on. Just practice the patterns and you'll get used to them, or make use of that Danger Dorito that has helped so many this expansion. Next up is Flare, which summons 2 split damage AoE towers in the front and the back. Send the melee and tanks forward, and the ranged and the healers back. If you have too many melee or ranged, well, figure that out at the start of the fight. Mitigate the initial flare hit before noticing that they are aiming these line fire AoEs around the arena. There's 4 different patterns, and it's just a matter of identifying which one. They're actually fairly wide, so don't try to squeeze between 2 if it looks like it would be tight. That means you're just gonna get hit. For the 4 possible safe spots, there's middle safe, then there is slightly offset to the left of the middle safe, basically middle safe again. Safe spots in the northeast and southwest corners, but not all the way in the corners, like these triangle safe spots as you see on the screen. And then finally, wall safe spots, which in my opinion are the most dangerous ones. Again, it's just a matter of pattern recognition or Doritos. Void Bio comes next, which summons poison orbs that gradually float across the room. You'll want to dodge them while doing a Visceral Whirl. If anyone touches them, they become poisoned and take heavy damage over time. It's technically survivable if your healers are on point, but you shouldn't be trying to get hit regardless. Other than that, it's just another whirl like the first one. Right after the second whirl is Big Bang, which does a spread AoE on everyone and then drops a whole bunch of AoEs around the room. Spread out with range in the back and melees and tanks up front, and avoid the ground hits. Quickly shield up and mitigate for Big Bang, and you're on to phase 2. Big Bang will not only do significant damage, but also provide every party member with a number of debuffs. First and foremost, your max HP is decreased, and for the first 15 seconds of the phase, everyone takes a few thousand points of damage per tick over time. Just make sure no one dies to this residually after the Big Bang hit itself. Players will also all receive 2 or 3 other markers. Acceleration Bomb is the usual don't do anything dice over your head mechanic, so when you see that, stop doing things. Divisive Dark is a spread AoE on all 8 players, Forked Lightning is a spread AoE on 2 players, and Beckoning Dark is a split damage AoE. These all have different timers, and I'll make mention of when they are resolving amongst the other mechanics during Big Bang's duration. Just make sure you identify if you have Forked Lightning, that's probably the most important one. The first mechanic right after Big Bang is the single biggest threat in the entire fight, Void Meteor. The initial cast drops a dozen or so meteors all over the front side of the arena, and 1 in the middle in the back. Each of them deals proximity damage, so step towards the back corners of the room. After they hit, 4 players will be tethered to a marker on the south side. It'll be southeast or southwest, and the boss will begin casting Meteor Impact. When this casts, the players will be bound and a meteor will fire in the line AoE they are marked with. They will also have a proximity that they need to reach as well, so you're going to have 2 markers on top of each other. This will then leave a similar meteor on the ground as well. These 4 players must accomplish 3 things. 1, they must stretch their tether far enough to survive the incoming hit. We'll come back to that point in a bit. 2, they must not have the line AoE overlapping with any meteors in its path. It will turn red to indicate that the meteor will clip another during its travel, which, if occurs, instantly wipes the group. And 3, they must ensure to be as far as possible because the other 4 players will have to drop them right after. Also, keep in mind that if 2 players are too close to each other, even if both of their line AoEs are blue, they will trigger each other's explosions. You'll likely see a last-second flash of red. We did also have one situation where one player had theirs drop in front of the other and then intercepted their meteor before it actually reached their point. So you need to be spread enough that even within the 4, your meteors won't interact with one another. While the mechanic has very few patterns, the visual overload is quite tricky. The general rule of thumb is to use body language to determine where you'll drop your meteor. The rightmost player, for example, should drop their meteor in the rightmost possible safe position, and so on and so forth. Don't try to cross over to the other side, but make sure that you're also being cognizant of the people who may need to shift over and get to another spot as well. You might be taking their spot and your spot might just be moved over a bit. Now, regardless of pattern, we always had 2 people on each half of the room aiming to drop their meteor as far back as possible. That didn't necessarily mean they were evenly spread either. In some patterns, people had to hug a little bit closer to the middle center of their half of the room, and in others, it looks like a nice, clean, easy spread. It just depends on the initial pattern of the meteors and whether you get the back left or back right meteor first, which does change. Remember, there's a meteor in the middle back of the room, right next to where you're baiting from. So if you shift too far over, you will hit that meteor. It stops you basically from crossing all the way and forces you to kind of go at a diagonal into the field of meteors. Here are a few diagrams, but the most important thing is that your line AoE is never red. If you can't personally resolve your line AoE distance tether, honestly, just kill yourself so you can avoid a meteor collision that will wipe all 8 of the other players. It sucks to say, but sacking is better than wiping, and this is the hardest mechanic of the fight, so getting past it is the most important thing. I'm not advocating you do this on purpose, mind you. I'm advocating you do it as a last-ditch effort to basically get the better of 2 bad results. Also, bear in mind that if less than 8 people were alive when the mechanic started, there will be less than 8 meteors total. I've seen some people suggest maybe killing a tank or something so you only have to do 7 meteors, and that's toxic. Please, we started the expansion with damage down memes. We don't need to end the expansion with sacking memes. Once both sets of meteors resolve, they will also do an AoE, so you just need to get away from them. Up until the point where they explode, however, you can just stand in the field of meteors if you're waiting your turn. So it's not actually a danger zone unless you hit them with yours. Bear that in mind if you feel the movement helps you a bit, or if you're a melee that just wants to be in melee range safely the whole time without worrying about getting hit by somebody else's. Speaking of that, yes, if you stand in the line of somebody else's meteor, it will murder you, so don't do that either. Anyway, with that behind us, go to the middle of the room after the meteors explode and chain markers will appear over everyone's head. As a Visceral Whirl begins casting, these will become chains that must be broken by running away from your partner. Supports chain to DPS, so we had supports run to the southmost safe spot from the whirl and the DPS the frontmost. Sorry tanks, you're going to be throwing tomahawks. Keep in mind if anyone was dead from meteors when the chains went out, some people may not have chains. If 2 or more people are dead, there may be mismatched roles as well, so 2 DPS could be tethered to each other or 2 supports. It depends on who died and how many people died, so if that happens, keep a special eye out for your chain partner in case one of you needs to flex. Once you've gotten to the first safe spot for Visceral Whirl, your debuff mechanics will begin resolving. First is Acceleration Bomb, which resolves right as the whirl is going off. Soon as you're in the safe spot, you should be seeing the dice over your head, so stop moving, stop attacking, hands off keyboard, don't do anything. Once that's done, you'll have to do the second dodge for Visceral. The rules are the same here, but shortly after will be a spread AoE on all 8 players. It's ideal if ranged and healers dodge closer to the back of the room instead of having all 8 players converge in the northmost safe spot as you may have gotten used to doing in the first phase. However, my group did just that, and then we were just smart about spreading. You know, melees and tanks don't go very far, healer can stay still, 3 other people spread. Just some common sense stuff, but I don't think that's reliable for most people, so try to learn to dodge to the back if you're ranged. Finally, the 2 Forked Lightning and the Split Damage AoE will go off. Forked Lightnings just fork off away from the party and don't be next to anyone else. The remaining non-tanks can stand with the stack marker in the middle of the room. The 2 tanks themselves will eat a dark matter like phase 1, so they just do tank things. After all that is over, it's Black Hole. This places a marker on a random player that, upon expiring, will drop a black hole on the ground. This gradually expands, pulling in anything it touches and instantly killing them. This player will want to hang middle-ish to wait for Zeromus' next attack before committing to where to drop the AoE. Zeromus will then begin casting Fractured Eventide, which has him fire a laser beam that will gradually turn and cross the room. The party other than the black hole player should stand in the corner nearest to where he starts facing, right up in the front of the room. Now, the game probably wants you to do this like normal mode, but honestly, we just had whoever got it drop it somewhere south-ish and then rescue them to the party, and it worked perfectly fine. Sometimes they got a vuln stack, but heck, I've seen people just gap close through that laser and get lucky with no vulns. So just be away from the party, really, and then rescue them towards them. Melee can even just drop it in melee range on the other side. Healers, just don't forget that rescue. Remember to stay in the corner after you start doing this as well. Don't accidentally move mid and get pulled in by the black hole. It'll get you. And if you'd rather not rely on rescue or server tick shenanigans to avoid vuln stacks, then you gotta drop it about halfway back and then follow the laser like you see my party doing here. We didn't put it halfway back, but this is the kind of movement you would do. Once that's over, Zeromus will do Big Crunch, which is exactly the same as Big Bang. Spread, mit, heal, survive, and watch that post-hit dot. This will also finally rid you of that max HP reduction you had as you go into Phase 3. Phase 3 is largely similar to Phase 1 with a new flare mechanic added in. Abyssal Nox is first, followed by dodging the 2 sets of circle AoEs. Then there's Sable Threads, but the threads are going to happen a little bit faster. Then you'll get to the new thing, Sparking or Branding Flare. This will put the 2 flare towers near the middle of the room regardless of which one casts. For these we use traditional light parties that we set up at the start because it just makes the movement for the next mechanic a little easier. Group 1 left, Group 2 right. Once the flares hit, we'll make use of the same role pairs that we set up at the start as well. The flares will always do AoEs that leave the 4 corners safe after this point, so go to the corner with your pair partner. Then, depending on which flare cast earlier, you'll either spread or stack up with your buddy. Sparking flare means spread in your corner, branding flare means buddies in your corner. Be sure not to move too early and accidentally kill your partner on the buddies thing. While the flares are resolving, 2 players will also be targeted by Nox, which is the chasing AoE from normal mode. It hits an extra time or 2, but it's not really any more threatening. These players should always bring the Nox to the far corner of their safe spot to ensure they have maximum available kiting distance. Once the flare AoEs hit, both the plus and the stacks or spreads, Nox players should run directly cardinal to another corner. Do not cross over, do not go middle, do not do anything but move from corner to an adjacent corner. I recommend you avoid running towards another Nox player's corner, as if you both move towards each other's, then that's not going to end well, but otherwise this alone should be enough distance to kite your AoE. The rest of the party can just chill in the middle of the room while you do it. After this, the phase mostly repeats mechanics. You'll get a Void Bio and Visceral Whirl, you'll get some Tank Busters, and then either a Sparking or Branding Flare, seemingly the opposite of whichever one you did first. If the phase drags on long enough, you will see another Abyssal Nox 1 HP check, so watch out for slow kill times. Regardless of what's happened, once the boss goes under 25% and it's not doing any other mechanics at the time, it will begin casting Rend of the Rift, dealing big raid-wide damage and entering Phase 4. This means you can skip a considerable portion of Phase 3 if your DPS is doing well, but since it's just repeated mechanics, that's not that big of a deal. This phase is mostly just dodge AoEs, heal, and mit. It can be largely brute force, but let's go over everything anyway. First off are the Void Thunder AoEs that Zeromus often drops in combination with other attacks. The first set is several back-to-back of these to avoid, followed by a new attack, Nostalgia. This attack hits 7 times, the first 4 hits dealing physical damage, and the last 3 hits dealing magical damage. Keep mit, shields, and heals rolling, and it shouldn't be a problem. Flow of the Abyss begins casting next, creating a fissure along the west side of the room. This will fire a 1/3 room-sized line AoE directly across, while forcing you to resolve any other mechanics within the remaining space. For the first flow, the boss will do one of 3 things in conjunction with it. It'll either do an 8-player spread, a stack marker, or 4 pair markers. For the stack marker, just all stack up mid and then take the damage in whatever row is safe that's still close to the boss. For spreads, it's ideal to send melees and tanks towards the frontmost safe row, and then healers and range to the furthest away safe row. That way you make sure you have plenty of space to actually do the spread. The main reason for this is because you will actually drop Ak Rise right after, which will continually hit. So you want to bait those and then move out of the way. And you don't want to stack them all because they do damage initially, and so that's not a good idea. That being said, you can squeeze all 8 players into one side of the room, and even if you take an extra hit or 2, it's not going to be the end of the world. Just don't stand still and get killed by their repeated hits. Finally is the pairs, probably the trickiest one. The best thing to do here is have your group 1 pairs go to the west, and your group 2 pairs go east, as far forward as possible without being hit by flow. So if flow's in the first row, you would do this in the second row. If flow's in the second row, you would do this in the first row. We actually, in our 5 clears, only saw this once. But all the same, there's plenty of space, so just line up, ideally with the range closer to the middle, just in case you got some casters, hashtag save the cast bars, but otherwise, it's just common sense. For the second flow, it will be comboed with Chasmic Nails, which is a 5-part conal AoE that goes off one at a time in the order shown. So you'll be dodging the nails while dodging the flow. However, right before the nail cast bar ends, he will also drop a Void Thunder under every player's location. Ideally, players bait their Void Thunders in the row that Flow of the Abyss will hit, then move forward or back to a safe row to dodge the nails. In practice, headless chickens. Just don't get hit by multiple things. If someone is hit by the nails, they'll get a damage over time that is cleansable, so keep those as soon as ready. Flow number 3 is a repeat of flow number 1, so just keep in mind the rules of spread, stacks, and pairs, and you should be fine. Then flow number 4 is a repeat of flow number 2, so just repeat what you did there. The phase then repeats until Zeromus is defeated. I never hit Enrage in our 5 day 1 clears, but I'd assume it's between 10 and 11 minutes. The furthest run we ever had was 9 minutes and 55 seconds, and that was right after Nostalgia had actually repeated and we were getting into flows number 1, 2, and 3 again. So, shouldn't be that bad. If you can get past the meteors, whether you have to sack people or not, then it is totally possible to brute force and zombie your way through. So don't give up on a death or two. It's very, very possible, and even then, just keep on trucking along. Good luck, Party Finder. I'll be joining you shortly. As for rewards, you got 655 weapons, you've got the crafting materials, you've got the music sheet, and of course, you've got the mount. Oh, there's also the card as well. And if you're like me, you'll see the mount on the second kill, roll an 80 and not feel that confident, but a little hopeful, and then lose it to an 84 and realize you'll probably never see one again. I'm not upset about it at all. Haha. Anyway, that's going to be a wrap for this video. Thank you for watching my guide to Zeromus Extreme. Be sure to like, favorite, subscribe, and share, and stay tuned for all the news on 6.5, opinion pieces, tier lists, and of course, information on the upcoming expansion, Dawn Trail. I will see you in the next one, and until then, take care.